At 2:13 in the morning, Arthur Bennett woke to the sound of a soft electronic beep. For a few seconds, he did not move. He lay beneath a thick wool blanket and listened to the winter wind pressing against the windows of his bedroom. Bare branches scraped across the glass, and somewhere deep inside the walls, the heating system gave a low mechanical hum. Then a calm female voice spoke from the ceiling. Bedroom temperature has been reduced to 14 degrees Celsius. All windows have been secured. Arthur opened his eyes. The room was almost completely dark, except for the blue light of the smart home control panel beside his bed. A small red light blinked from the security camera in the corner of the ceiling. Arthur pulled the blanket tighter around his shoulders. "Alexa," he said, his voice rough from sleep. "Raise the bedroom temperature to 22 degrees. The system paused. Request denied. Voice pattern does not match the authorized user profile. Arthur frowned. "That's wrong. Try again." "Raise the temperature to 22 degrees. Request denied." Arthur pushed himself upright. The cold air touched his face and hands. He could already feel his fingers becoming stiff. "I am Arthur Bennett," he said, more loudly. "I own this house. Identity cannot be confirmed." A chill passed through him that had nothing to do with the temperature. Arthur had lived in the Cherry Creek house for almost 20 years. He had chosen the stone for the fireplace, the wood for the staircase, and the large windows that looked over the garden. He had spent months working with the architect to make every room feel open and warm. Now the house was telling him that he did not belong there. Arthur threw the blanket aside and stepped onto the floor. The polished wood was so cold that he pulled his feet back for a moment. He crossed the room and grabbed the door handle. It did not move. He pulled harder. A metal lock clicked inside the door. Door secured for the resident's protection. The system announced. Arthur stared at it. Unlock the door. Request denied. Emergency override. Access denied. Arthur struck the door with his fist. "Claire," his voice disappeared into the hallway. "Evan, is anyone out there?" No one answered. He hit the door again. "Open this door." A burst of static came through the ceiling speaker. Then he heard his daughter's voice. "Dad?" Arthur froze. "Claire? Dad? You forgot to take your medicine again." Her voice sounded almost perfect. It had the same gentle tone Claire had used since she was a child, but something about it felt wrong. The words were too evenly spaced. The pauses were too exact. There was no breath behind them. Arthur slowly looked up at the speaker. "Claire, where are you? You are experiencing confusion. Are you in the house? You are having delusions? Dad." The smart tablet on the bedside table suddenly lit up. A document appeared on the screen. At the top, in large black letters, were the words, "Pari my management power of attorney." Arthur stared at it. "Dad signed the document," Claire's voice said. "Then I can send someone inside to help you." Arthur moved closer to the tablet but did not touch it. "What document is this?" "It will allow Evan and me to protect you and manage your property." "Claire, answer me. Where are you? You need help, Dad." The temperature dropped again. 13 degrees. Arthur's hands began to shake. "Claire, what did your mother give me for our 30th wedding anniversary?" The system remained silent for 2 seconds. Then the voice answered. "The question is not related to your current medical condition." Arthur stepped back. "You're not Claire. You are confused. You are not my daughter. Sign the document." Arthur grabbed the tablet and nearly threw it across the room. But then he stopped. If the device was damaged, whoever controlled the system might make things worse. He placed it face down on the table. "Unlock the door. Sign the document." "Unlock the door. Sign the document." Arthur wrapped the blanket around himself and sat on the floor beside the bed. The voice repeated the same instruction every few minutes. The temperature continued to fall. Arthur was 70 years old. He had high blood pressure and a history of irregular heartbeats. Whoever was doing this might know that. He closed his eyes and tried to control his breathing. In business, Arthur had survived bad partners, dishonest contractors, and people who smiled while trying to steal from him. He had built a real estate company from nothing and sold it for more money than he had ever expected to make. He knew what pressure looked like. This was not a technical error. It was pressure. Someone wanted his signature, and they were willing to make him suffer until they got it. Arthur remained on the floor until morning. At 6:40, the bedroom door unlocked by itself. The heat returned as if nothing had happened. The tablet screen went dark, and the house system welcomed him with its usual cheerful voice. Good morning, Arthur. The outdoor temperature is -3 degrees Celsius. Arthur stood slowly. His legs were weak, his neck hurt. He looked at the camera in the corner. The red light was no longer blinking. He did not know who had been watching him during the night, but he knew there was only one person he could trust. 3 days later, Arthur sat across from Lawrence Wright at a stone chess table in Washington Park. They had played chess every Saturday morning for almost 20 years. The tradition had started when Lawrence was still working as a court reporter in Denver, and Arthur was still building apartment complexes around the city. Neither man remembered who had won their first game. Both claimed that the other had cheated. Lawrence was 67, with silver hair, a sharp face, and the quiet habits of a man who had spent 35 years listening carefully while other people spoke. As a court reporter, he had recorded thousands of hours of testimony. He had watched confident men fall apart under simple questions. He had heard frightened witnesses tell the truth, and charming criminals lie without blinking. The job had taught him something important. People rarely revealed themselves through their words alone. They revealed themselves through their pauses, their breathing, their hands, and the things they avoided saying. That morning, Arthur had made 3 basic mistakes in less than 10 minutes. He moved his bishop into danger. He failed to protect his queen. Then he reached for a knight and knocked over his coffee instead. Lawrence looked at the board. You've left your queen open. Arthur blinked. What? 2 moves ago. Arthur looked down and quickly tried to correct it. Lawrence stopped him. No. It was an accident. You don't make that kind of accident. I'm tired. You've also looked behind you 7 times since we sat down. Arthur forced a weak smile. Maybe I'm becoming more careful. You're not careful. You're afraid. Arthur's smile disappeared. Lawrence leaned back in his chair. What is happening at your house? Nothing. You answered too quickly, Lawrence. You haven't looked me in the eye since I asked. Arthur stared at the chessboard. A woman walked past with a golden retriever. The small metal tag on the dog's collar made a light ringing sound. Arthur flinched. Lawrence slowly moved his king away from the center of the board. We can stop the game. Arthur said nothing. I'm not going to push you, Lawrence continued. But I am not going to pretend that you're fine. Arthur rubbed his hands together. I think I'm losing my mind. Lawrence did not laugh or offer an easy answer. What makes you think that? My house. What about it? It doesn't listen to me anymore. Arthur told him about the locked doors, the changing temperatures, and the lights that switched on in the middle of the night. He described the messages appearing on screens, warning him that his memory was failing. Then he told Lawrence about Claire's voice coming from the ceiling. When he finished, Lawrence remained silent. Did you call Claire afterward? He asked. Yes, she said she was at home with Evan all night. What did she say about the voice? She said, I may have dreamed it. And Evan? He checked the system records. He said there was no error and no locked door. Then he suggested that I see a neurologist. Lawrence's eyes narrowed. Evan installed the smart home system, correct? Yes. He controls the central account. Yes. Do you have the administrator password? Arthur looked uncomfortable. No. Why not? Evan said the security settings were too complicated. He said it would be safer if he managed them for me. What exactly does the system control? The cameras, heating, air conditioning, door locks, windows, lights, smoke alarms, speakers, and security sensors. In other words, almost everything. Arthur nodded. Lawrence picked up his coffee but did not drink. Does Evan have access to your bank accounts? No. Your investment accounts? No. Power of attorney? No. Your will? He knows Claire is my main heir, but she receives everything only after I die. Lawrence looked at him carefully. Has Evan ever asked you to give Claire control of your money while you are alive? A few times. He said it would make things easier if I became ill. And what did you say? I refused. Lawrence placed the cup down. Arthur, a software problem can lock a door. It can change the temperature. It might even play the wrong audio file. Arthur looked at him hopefully. But a random software problem does not prepare a legal document and demand your signature at the exact moment you are trapped in a freezing room. Arthur's face went pale. You think someone is doing this on purpose. I think someone is trying to make you doubt your own memory. Evan? He has the means. That does not yet prove he is responsible. Arthur looked away. If it is Evan, what about Claire? We don't know what Claire knows. She is my daughter. I know. She wouldn't do this to me. Lawrence had heard that sentence many times in courtrooms. My son would never steal from me. My husband would never hurt me. My business partner would never lie. Sometimes those people were right. Sometimes they were wrong. Lawrence chose his next words carefully. Love is not evidence, Arthur. Neither is fear. We need facts. Arthur studied his friend's face. What should I do? First, do not sign anything. Not on paper, not on a tablet, not with your fingerprint. Your face, your voice, or your eyes. Arthur nodded. Second, don't tell Evan that you spoke to me. Why? If someone is manipulating you, we cannot let them know you have stopped trusting the situation. Arthur looked down at the pieces on the board. Lawrence moved a knight toward the center. One more thing. What? When a man controls the doors, the temperature, the cameras and every voice inside, another man's home, he is no longer providing security. Lawrence looked directly at Arthur. He is building a prison without bars. That afternoon, Lawrence returned to his small house on Fairfax Street. His home had no voice assistant. The front door opened with a brass key. The thermostat had 2 buttons. The only camera was an old one stored in a drawer, with several rolls of film that had expired years ago. His late wife, Sarah, had once joked that Lawrence would rather trust a rusty lock than a password. He had always told her that locks could be seen, tested, and replaced. Passwords existed only until someone smarter found a way around them. Sarah had died 4 years earlier after a short illness. Lawrence still wore his wedding ring. Her photograph remained on his desk, beside a small vase that he filled with fresh flowers every Monday. He entered his office, took out a black notebook, and wrote 3 names on a clean page. Arthur Bennett, Claire Bennett Cross, Even Cross. Then he drew 3 columns: motive, means, opportunity. Even had the means. He controlled the house. He had the opportunity. Arthur trusted him and allowed him to work on the system whenever he wanted. The missing piece was motive. Lawrence called Gerald Hoffman. Gerald was a former Denver police detective who now worked as a private investigator. He and Lawrence had met during a fraud case nearly 20 years earlier. Gerald had been the detective. Lawrence had recorded the testimony. They had trusted each other ever since. I need a background check, Lawrence said. Legal or interesting? Gerald asked. Both. Name, Evan Cross. 32. Software engineer. Married to Claire Bennett. Arthur's daughter? Yes. Gerald's tone changed. Is Arthur in trouble? Possibly. What kind? The kind where an old man may lose his freedom before he loses his house. Gerald was silent for a moment. What do you need? Employment history, debts, lawsuits, business, interests, and anything public connected to his finances. I'll start tonight. Lawrence made a second call to Patricia Chen, an attorney who specialized in estate planning and elder protection. He did not explain everything over the phone. He simply asked for an urgent private meeting with Arthur. Afterward, Lawrence opened the locked lower drawer of his filing cabinet. Inside were several tools from his years at the courthouse. Most had no value to anyone else. There were old transcription foot pedals, spare microphone parts, handwritten shorthand notebooks, and a black digital recording unit from the 1990s. The device was heavy and plain. It had internal storage, a physical microphone input, and no wireless connection of any kind. No Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth, no cloud backup, no remote access. Lawrence lifted it out. Sarah's photograph seemed to watch him from the desk. "I know what you would say," he murmured. "You would say I'm too old to sneak into someone else's house." He paused. "And then you would help me choose the best hiding place." 2 days later, Arthur sat in Patricia Chen's office. Patricia was calm, direct, and careful. She never placed a document in front of a client until she had explained every page in simple language. Before discussing the house, she asked Arthur a long series of questions. What day was it? Who was the governor of Colorado? How many properties had he owned before retirement? What was the name of the company he sold? What major medical decisions had he made in the last 5 years? Arthur answered clearly. He remembered the purchase price of his Cherry Creek home, the balance of his main investment account, and the exact year his wife had died. Patricia closed her notebook. "Mr. Bennett, I see no clear sign that you lack the ability to make your own financial or legal decisions." Arthur released a breath. "At least one professional believes I'm still sane." "I am not making a decision based on belief," Patricia said. "I am making it based on what I have observed." Lawrence sat beside him. "What can we do to protect the property?" Patricia folded her hands. "We can move the house and selected financial assets into an irrevocable living trust, managed by an independent trustee. Mr. Bennett would keep the right to live in the home for the rest of his life. But no personal power of attorney could simply transfer the property to someone else." Arthur considered it. "If I change my mind, you would not have the same freedom to sell or borrow against the house without the trustee's involvement. So I would give up some control. Yes, in exchange, the property would be much harder for anyone else to steal." Arthur looked at Lawrence. Then he turned back to Patricia. "Prepare it." Patricia raised a hand. "I need to be certain. Is anyone forcing you to do this?" "No. Do you understand the result?" "Yes. Is this your decision?" Arthur's voice became firm. "I built my business over 40 years. I will not allow someone to take everything, because they know how to control a tablet." Patricia nodded. "Then we will begin." Later that afternoon, Arthur called Evan and told him he had a medical appointment followed by live with Lawrence. At 4:20, the smart home cameras recorded Arthur leaving through the front door. 10 minutes later, Lawrence drove him back and parked 2 streets away. They approached the house through the garden. Years earlier, before the smart system was installed, the home had a narrow service entrance beside the storage room. Evan had replaced nearly every lock in the house. But he had ignored that old door because Arthur no longer used it. The brass key still worked. They stepped inside. The house was silent. Arthur led Lawrence to his private study. The room held old development maps, framed photographs, and a large wooden grandfather clock that had belonged to Arthur's father. It stood nearly 7 feet tall, with a carved oak case, a brass pendulum, and a face marked with Roman numerals. A smart camera moved slowly in the corner of the ceiling. It turned toward the desk, then toward the windows. But it stopped before reaching the clock. Evan said the glass on the clock confused the camera, Arthur whispered. So he created a permanent blind spot. Lawrence watched the camera complete another movement. How thoughtful of him. He opened the back of the clock and examined the space beneath the mechanical movement. Arthur looked at the old recording device in Lawrence's hand. "That thing will fit?" "The main unit stays hidden lower down. The microphone goes above it." "Does it send the recording anywhere?" "No, that is the point." How will you know if it captures anything? I won't. Not until we remove it. Arthur frowned. So we are trusting a machine from 30 years ago. Lawrence smiled slightly. It has fewer ways to betray us. He fixed the microphone inside the clock, secured the recording unit, and closed the wooden panel. From the outside, nothing had changed. Arthur looked at the clock. My wife gave that to me after my father died. Then maybe it is time the old clock protected the family. Before leaving, Lawrence turned to Arthur. You must behave as though you still believe the house is malfunctioning. You want me to pretend I am weak. I want Evan to believe his plan is working. I hate giving ground. This is not surrender. It is a trap. Lawrence pointed at the chess set on Arthur's shelf. Sometimes you let your opponent move deeper into your position because he is too proud to see the danger. That evening, Evan arrived with Claire. Evan was handsome, well-dressed, and always calm. He wore expensive watches, drove a black luxury sedan, and spoke with the easy confidence of a man who expected people to trust him. To Arthur's friends, he appeared to be the perfect son-in-law. He had a high-level job at a software company. He understood investments. He was polite at dinner. He remembered birthdays. But behind his controlled appearance, Evan was in serious trouble. Lawrence did not know the details yet, but Gerald was already finding them. Evan had borrowed heavily to invest in risky technology stocks. At first, the prices had gone up, and he had believed he was smarter than everyone else. Then the market changed. His investments fell. Instead of accepting the loss, he borrowed more money and bought more shares. Now his broker was demanding a large payment. If Evan failed to provide it, the account would be closed and his remaining investments sold. He could lose his apartment, his car, and the reputation he had spent years building. Arthur was sitting in the living room when Evan came in. Claire carried a bag of food. "Dad, how are you feeling?" she asked. "Better. Do you remember what happened the other night?" Arthur looked down at his hands. Not clearly. Evan sat across from him. "You called us and said someone had locked you in the bedroom." Arthur nodded. "But the house records show that the door was never locked," Evan continued. "Maybe I was confused." Evan's expression softened. "That can happen. You shouldn't feel embarrassed." Arthur looked at Claire. She avoided his eyes. "I made an appointment for you with a neurologist." Evan said, "I don't need a neurologist." The words came out more strongly than Arthur intended. For less than a second, Evan's face changed. His eyes hardened. His jaw tightened, then the gentle expression returned. "We only want to help you." Arthur had spent decades negotiating with people who hid their true feelings behind smiles. This time he noticed the mask. He lowered his head. "I'm sorry. I didn't sleep well." Evan reached into his coat and placed a small box of medicine on the table. "This may help. What is it?" "A mild sleep aid." "Did my doctor prescribe it?" "It's safe." "That was not my question." Claire looked at her husband, Evan. "Maybe Dad should speak to his doctor first." Evan smiled at her. "Of course, we're not forcing him." He left the medicine on the table. That night, the smart home speakers woke Arthur at 1:05. "Arthur, it is time to take your medication." He stayed still. "Arthur, it is time to take your medication." A drawer beside his bed opened automatically. Inside were 2 white tablets. Arthur got out of bed, picked them up, and placed them inside a small plastic bag Lawrence had given him. He did not swallow them. The next morning, Gerald sent the pills to a private laboratory. The results came back later that day. They were strong sedatives. Arthur had never been prescribed them. Lawrence read the report twice. If Arthur had taken the pills, he could have become confused, weak, and unsteady. A camera might have recorded him walking through the house, like a man with severe mental decline. If Evan wanted evidence that Arthur could no longer care for himself, he could create it. The phone rang. It was Gerald. "I found the motive," he said. "Debt? A lot of it. Evan owes more than $600,000 through personal loans, credit cards, and margin trading. How soon does he need money? His broker issued a final demand, Monday morning. Lawrence looked at the calendar on his desk. 4 days. Anything else? He has been asking lenders about using real estate as security. His apartment does not have enough value. Arthur's house does. The Cherry Creek property is worth around $1.5 million. Exactly. Lawrence looked at the laboratory report. So Evan does not need Arthur's house someday. He needs it now. 2 nights later, Evan and Claire returned to the mansion. Arthur told them he was tired and lay down on the sofa with his eyes closed. He listened as Evan moved through the house, checking the control system and speaking quietly into his phone. At first, Arthur heard nothing useful. Then Evan and Claire stopped near the kitchen hallway, only a short distance from the grandfather clock. The recorder inside the wooden case was already running. "Tomorrow night," Evan said, "we finish this." Claire's voice was unsteady. "What exactly are you going to do?" "Give him the final document." "He won't sign, he will. You tried before." "He was too alert." Claire stared at him. "What does that mean?" "It means the timing was wrong." "Did you put those pills in his room?" Evan lowered his voice. "They were only to help him sleep. His doctor never prescribed them." "Claire, stop making this more dramatic than it is." "You locked him in his room. It was a system test. You lowered the temperature. The settings failed, and the voice coming through the speakers?" "My voice?" Evan said nothing. Claire's face lost its color. "You used the recordings I gave you." "I used them to improve the voice model." "You told me they were for the home assistant." "They were. You made the system sound like me." Evan stepped closer, and it worked perfectly. He believed it was you. Claire stared at her husband as though he had become a stranger. "You told Dad he was having delusions. He already doubts himself." "I only encouraged him to accept reality." "That is not reality." "It will be when everyone believes it." Claire shook her head. "I don't want any part of this." Evan laughed softly. "You have been part of it from the beginning." "No. You gave me your father's medical history. You gave me voice recordings. You helped me prepare the documents. You said we were helping him manage his finances. And we are. You are trying to take his house." "I am trying to save our future." Claire stepped back. "What happened to your investment account?" "That is none of your concern. You said it was recovering." "It will recover when I have enough money to meet the margin call." Claire slowly understood. "This is about your debt. This is about us." "No, this is about you." Evan's expression became cold. "We need one signature, one fingerprint, and one eye scan. Once I have control of the property, I can use it as security. We clear the debt and move on." "What happens to Dad?" "He stays here." "In a house you control? He will be safe." "You locked him in a freezing room. He survived." Claire covered her mouth. "What if he has a heart attack?" Evan was silent for a moment. Then he shrugged. "Arthur has high blood pressure. He is 70 years old." Claire stared at him. "What are you saying?" "If something happens, it will look natural. No, no one will blame a smart thermostat. They will say an old man suffered a stroke during winter." Arthur lay still on the sofa, fighting the urge to stand up. His chest felt tight. He had feared that Evan wanted his property. He had not allowed himself to believe that Evan might be willing to let him die for it. Claire began to cry. "You're sick." Evan's voice became quiet and threatening. "Be careful. If you go to the police, what will you tell them? That you gave me the recordings? That you helped collect his documents? That you knew we were preparing a power of attorney?" "I didn't know this was the plan." "You knew enough." Claire said nothing. Evan looked at the grandfather clock. For one terrifying second, Arthur thought he had noticed something. But Evan only checked the time. "Tomorrow night," he said. "We end this." They left at 10:40. Arthur remained still for several minutes after the front door closed. Then he opened his eyes. Tears ran down the sides of his face. His son-in-law had betrayed him. That was painful. but not surprising anymore. Claire's role hurt more. She may not have known the full plan, but she had helped Evan enter Arthur's private life. She had given him medical information, recordings and access because she believed her husband knew best, or because it was easier not to ask questions. Arthur walked to the grandfather clock. The pendulum moved slowly behind the glass. Dotchkik, talk. Tick, tock. He touched the wooden case. Please tell me you heard that. The old clock gave no answer, but inside it, Lawrence's recorder had captured every word. The next morning, Lawrence sat inside Gerald's unmarked sedan near Washington Park. The recorder was connected to a laptop that was not connected to the internet. Gerald wore headphones. He listened without speaking. When Evan's voice said, "No one will blame a smart thermostat," Gerald stopped the recording. He removed the headphones. This man is talking about Arthur's death. Is it enough? Lawrence asked. It is enough for me to contact the Elder Abuse Unit and request emergency action. It may also support search warrants, especially with the pills and the house records. Can they arrest him now? Possibly, but he will claim he was angry, joking, or speaking without intent. A defense lawyer will attack the recording. We need the digital evidence from his devices, and it would help to catch him trying to force the signature. Lawrence opened a folder. Patricia finished the trust this morning. Gerald read the first page. The Cherry Creek house and most of Arthur's major assets had been moved under independent management. Arthur still had the right to live there for life. But Evan could not simply gain control by obtaining a personal power of attorney. Gerald smiled without humor. So Evan is trying to steal a house that Arthur no longer has the power to hand him directly. He does not know that, and you want to let him try. We let him take the final step while the police are watching. Gerald looked at Lawrence. This is a smart house controlled by a desperate software engineer. If he realizes it is a trap, he could lock every door, shut off the lights, or destroy the system records. That is why the important evidence is not inside his system. Gerald looked at the old recorder, offlane, physical. Something he cannot erase from his phone. Gerald nodded slowly. I know a lieutenant in the Denver Elder Abuse Unit. I'll bring him the recording and the lab report. He started gathering the documents, then paused. Why are you doing this, Lawrence? Arthur is my friend. That is not the whole reason. Lawrence looked through the windshield at the trees in the park. Years ago, I worked on a case involving an elderly woman. Her son convinced everyone that she had dementia. He moved her money, sold her home, and placed her in a care facility. What happened? By the time the truth came out, she was too weak to testify. Gerald said nothing. I recorded the case, Lawrence continued. Every witness, every expert, every excuse, but I recorded it after the damage was done. You were a court reporter. It was not your job to stop it. I know. Lawrence closed the folder. But this time, I am here before the final signature. On Sunday's evening, snow began falling over Cherry Creek. Arthur sat at the dining room table with a bowl of soup in front of him. He had barely touched it. The house played soft piano music. The lights were warm. The temperature was comfortable. For the first time in weeks, the smart system behaved perfectly. That frightened Arthur more than the earlier failures. Evan arrived at 7:15. Claire followed him inside. Her face was pale, and she kept her arms close to her body as though she were cold, even placed a tablet on the table. How are you feeling, Dad? Arthur lowered his eyes. Tired, I understand. We can make this quick. Evan opened a document. This version was longer than the one Arthur had seen in the bedroom. It contained more than 30 pages of legal language. The title read, Agreement for the Transfer of Property Management and Financial Authority. Evan quickly scrolled to the final page. This allows Claire and me to manage the house, pay the bills, and handle emergencies. Arthur looked at the screen. Will the house still belong to me? Of course. Can you sell it? No. Can you borrow money against it? Evan's finger stopped moving. Why would you ask that? I want to understand what I am signing. There is no need to worry about complicated legal language. I built a real estate company. Legal language does not frighten me. Evan smiled, but the expression looked forced. You are not as strong as you used to be. Arthur looked at Claire. Have you read this? Claire opened her mouth. Evan answered first. She trusts me. I asked my daughter. Claire looked at the tablet. I read some of it. Does it give Evan the right to use my house as security for a loan? Claire's eyes moved toward her husband. Evan slid the tablet closer to Arthur. Dad, you are making yourself upset. Just sign and we can fix the security system. Arthur picked up the electronic pen. His hand appeared to shake, Evan relaxed. Good. Sign on the line. Arthur held the pen above the screen. If I sign, will the doors stop locking? Yes. The temperature will stay normal. Yes. And I will not hear Claire's voice telling me I am losing my mind. Claire looked sharply at Evan. Evan's smile vanished. You imagined that? Arthur raised his eyes. Did I? You are having delusions, Dad. There it was. The same sentence, the same calm cruelty. Arthur placed the pen down. I will not sign. For a moment no one moved. Then every light in the room blinked. A hard metal click came from the front door. Another came from the hallway. The smart system announced, Emergency, security mode activated. All exits have been locked. Claire turned toward Evan. What did you do? Nothing. The system is responding to a possible medical emergency. Arthur looked at the wall control panel. The temperature began to rise. 24 degrees, 26, 28. Warm air poured from the vents. Evan picked up the pen and pressed it into Arthur's hand. Sign the document. No. Sign it, and I will reset the system. Claire grabbed Evan's arm. Stop this. He pulled away. This is none of your concern. He is my father, and this is our future. The temperature reached 30 degrees. Arthur's face became red. Sweat appeared at his hairline. Evan pushed the tablet closer. One signature, that is all. Arthur breathed slowly, trying not to show fear. You are threatening me in my own house. I am helping you make a decision you are no longer able to make. You mean the decision that saves your investment account. Evan froze. Arthur saw the panic in his eyes. You know about that? More than you think. Evan grabbed the tablet. His thumb moved across the screen. The lights became dimmer. Claire backed away. Evan, unlock the doors. No one is leaving until this is finished. A voice came from the hallway. In court, we call that coercion. Evan turned. Lawrence Wright stood at the entrance to the dining room. Behind him was Gerald Hoffman, 2 Denver police officers and a detective from the Elder Abuse Unit. Evan stared at them. How did you get inside? Lawrence held up an old brass key. Through a door that does not require permission from your phone. Evan immediately reached for the smart home application. Gerald raised a small device. The system has been disconnected from remote control. Put the phone on the table. You have no right to be here, Arthur stood. This is my home, I invited them. Evan pointed at him. He is mentally unstable. He does not understand what is happening. Lawrence took a folder from beneath his arm. This is an independent evaluation, confirming that Arthur is fully capable of making his own decisions. That proves nothing. It proves more than the videos you created, after keeping him awake, changing the temperature and placing sedatives in his room. Claire covered her mouth. Evan's face turned pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Lawrence removed the old recorder from his coat. You are very confident in your technology, Evan. What is that? Something that does not need your network. Lawrence pressed the play button. At first, there was only the faint ticking of the grandfather clock. Then Evan's voice filled the room. The voice model worked perfectly. He believed it was you. Evan stared at the device. Claire began crying. The recording continued. We need 1 signature, 1 fingerprint, and 1 eye scan. Then came the sentence that changed the expression of every officer in the room. No one will blame a smart thermostat. They will say, an old man suffered a stroke during winter. Even stepped backward. That is fake. No one answered. He edited it. It is artificial audio. Lawrence looked at him calmly. An interesting defense from a man who used artificial audio to copy his wife's voice. Evan's eyes moved toward the grandfather clock. Understanding appeared on his face. The clock? Lawrence nodded. The only place your cameras could not see. Evan suddenly rushed forward. He reached for the recorder. Gerald moved between them, and the officers caught Evan by both arms. Evan fought against them. My system blocks wireless recording signals. Nothing could transmit from this house. Lawrence held up the device. It did not transmit. Evan stopped struggling. No Wi-Fi. Lawrence said. No Bluetooth. No cloud storage. No wireless signal for your system to detect. He stepped closer. You built walls against every modern threat you could imagine. But you never considered a machine that simply listened and kept the truth inside itself. Evan's face had lost all color. Lawrence's voice remained quiet. You thought controlling the digital world meant controlling reality. You forgot that real evidence can still exist in the physical world. Gerald handed a document to the lead detective. We also have a warrant to search your phone, computers, online accounts, and the smart home control servers. Evan looked toward Claire. Tell them it was your idea. Claire stared at him. What? You gave me the recordings. You brought me the medical files. Tell them you planned it. Claire stepped back. You told me we were helping him. You knew about the documents. I did not know you were trying to hurt him. You think they will believe that? Claire looked at her father. Dad, I am sorry. Arthur's expression did not change. His daughter's tears hurt him, but he could not comfort her. Not yet. There were some wounds that could not be closed with a single apology. The lead officer pulled Evan's arms behind his back. Evan Cross, you are under arrest on suspicion of attempted fraud, coercion, unlawful imprisonment, elder abuse, and reckless endangerment. You have the right to remain silent. The handcuffs closed with a sharp click. Arthur recognized the sound. It was the same cold sound the bedroom door had made when Evan trapped him inside. But this time, the lock was not holding Arthur. It was holding Evan. As the officers led him toward the front door, Evan continued speaking. You have nothing. That recording will never hold up. I never touched him. I never forced him to sign. Lawrence looked at the tablet still lying on the table. You locked the exits and raised the temperature while demanding his signature in front of 5 witnesses. Evan finally stopped talking outside. Several neighbors had gathered beneath the falling snow. Red and blue lights moved across the walls of the expensive homes. The man who had controlled every door in Arthur's house was taken through the front entrance in handcuffs. The investigation lasted through the night. Police seized Evan's laptop, phone, external drives, and the small private server that controlled the house. The evidence was worse than Lawrence had expected. Evan had stored hundreds of audio files containing Claire's voice. He had used them to train an artificial voice model that could create new sentences. He had prepared scripts designed to frighten Arthur. Dad, you forgot your medicines. Dad, you are becoming dangerous. Dad, you cannot take care of yourself. Sign the document and we will help you. Investigators found logs showing that Evan had remotely changed the temperature, locked doors, and disabled Arthur's access to the system. They also found video clips of Arthur walking through the house after sleepless nights. The folder was labeled Cognitivity Evidence. The recordings were meant to make Arthur look confused and unstable. But the timestamps showed that each video followed hours of alarms, temperature changes, or repeated audio messages. Evan had not recorded a mental decline. He had created one, on his computer. Investigators found copies of false medical statements, unfinished power of attorney documents, and plans to use Arthur's house as security for a large emergency loan. His browser history included searches such as How long can an elderly person remain in a cold room? Can heat cause confusion in seniors? Does a smart home system save temperature history? How to prove an elderly parent lacks mental capacity? The final discovery was a spreadsheet. It listed Arthur's property, investments, and expected inheritance. Beside each asset was a date. Evan had been planning the takeover for months. He had first encouraged Arthur to install the smart system after a small break-in occurred in the neighborhood. He had called it a gift, a way to keep Arthur safe. In truth, Evan had been building control into every room. Within a week, prosecutors filed charges that included financial fraud, digital forgery, elder abuse, unlawful imprisonment, and attempted theft of property. The recorded statement about Arthur's possible death led to a deeper investigation into whether Evan had intended to cause serious harm. Claire cooperated with the police. She surrendered her phone and gave them every message she had exchanged with Evan. The messages showed that she had helped collect Arthur's voice samples, medical information, and financial documents. She had believed Evan's claim that they needed to prepare for Arthur's future care, but she had also ignored warning signs. When Evan asked for too much, she did not question him. When Arthur complained about the house, she accepted Evan's explanation. When her father said he was afraid, she told herself he was simply getting older. Claire was not treated as completely innocent. She had helped create the situation, even if she had not understood Evan's full plan. She was required to cooperate with the investigation and faced legal consequences for her role in obtaining private information. Arthur did not speak to her for several weeks. He loved his daughter. That had not changed. But trust was not a light that could be switched back on after someone apologized. It had to be rebuilt slowly. The smart home system was removed from the mansion. Arthur hired an independent company to install simple safety equipment. The outside cameras remained, but there were no cameras inside the bedrooms or private rooms. The thermostat could be controlled by hand. Every main door had a mechanical lock that opened from the inside. The speakers were disconnected. The wall panel that had once said *Locky was removed, leaving a pale rectangular mark on the wall. Arthur chose not to paint over it immediately. He wanted to remember what had happened there. 3 weeks later, Lawrence visited him on a clear morning. The snow had begun to melt. Drops of water fell from the roof, and small green shoots appeared in the garden. Arthur brought 2 cups of ginger tea to the back porch. A chessboard sat between them. For a while neither man spoke. Then Arthur asked, "Do you think I should forgive Claire?" Lawrence studied the board. "That is not a decision I can make for you." She helped him. Yes. But she also helped the police. Yes. Arthur looked toward the garden. When she was a little girl, she was afraid of storms. Every time there was thunder, she ran into our room and climbed into bed between her mother and me. Lawrence waited. "I keep seeing that child," Arthur continued. "Then I remember her standing behind Evan while he put that tablet in front of me." "Good memories do not erase bad choices," Arthur nodded. "And bad choices do not erase every good memory." "No." "So what do I do?" "You decide what forgiveness means." Arthur looked at him. "It does not have to mean giving her access to your money again. It does not have to mean pretending nothing happened. It does not have to mean trusting her immediately. Then what does it mean? It may simply mean leaving the door open for her to become better." Arthur looked toward the house. "The trust will remain." "That is wise. Patricia helped me change the long-term plan. After I die, most of the estate will support a program for elderly people who have been financially abused." Lawrence smiled. "That is a good use of it. I left something for Claire." "With conditions?" "She must complete counseling, accept responsibility, and prove she can live without waiting for my money." Arthur picked up a white pawn. "I love my daughter, but I finally understand that love does not mean giving someone control over everything." Lawrence moved a black pawn. "You have learned the first rule of chess." Arthur raised an eyebrow. "Which rule?" Protect the king before you plan the victory. Arthur laughed. It was the first real laugh Lawrence had heard from him in months. They began to play. Arthur moved a knight into an aggressive position. 5 minutes later, he sacrificed it to open Lawrence's defense. Lawrence looked at the board. There you are. What does that mean? That is the Arthur Bennett I know. Arthur lifted his tea. Be careful. I am about to take your queen. You always say that. This time I mean it. The morning sun rose higher over Cherry Creek. A light wind moved through the garden and touched the small metal wind chime hanging above the porch. The gentle sound carried through the quiet yard. Arthur leaned back in his chair. Thank you, Lawrence. For what? For believing me when I had started to doubt myself. Lawrence looked at him. I did not simply believe you. Arthur waited. I believed the pattern. What pattern? Anyone can forget where they left their keys. Anyone can wake from a bad dream or misunderstand a sound. Lawrence moved his bishop, but when every strange event pushes a person toward the same signature, the same loss of control, and the same conclusion, it is no longer a group of accidents. It is a plan, Arthur said. Yes, Arthur looked through the glass doors into the house. We spend our lives building homes for our families. We do, and sometimes the things we build become reasons for people to betray us. Lawrence shook his head. The house did not create Evan's greed. It only gave his greed a target. Arthur was silent for a moment. Technology can copy a voice now. It can lock doors, change the temperature, and create videos that look real. Yes, what protects us when we can no longer trust what we hear? Lawrence looked toward the grandfather clock inside the study. The same things that have always protected the truth. Which are patience, evidence, and people who are willing to listen carefully. The clock struck 10. Its sound moved through the house, deep, steady, and real. It had no internet connection. It did not recognize voices. It did not collect data or make decisions. It simply stood in the corner and kept time. Yet when the smartest system in the house was being used to hide the truth, the old clock had been the one thing that preserved it. Arthur placed his fingers around a chess piece. For months, he had felt like a prisoner inside the home he had built. Now he could walk to any door and open it himself. He could change the temperature without asking permission. He could sit in silence, without hearing a false version of his daughter's voice. He had lost his trust in people he loved, but he had kept his home, his freedom, and his right to make his own decisions. Most importantly, he had kept the truth, because no matter how advanced technology becomes, there is one thing proud and dishonest people often forget. The truth does not need an internet connection to survive.